Loose forwards will be interesting whether they persist with Simon Parker, because I feel like he is a guy who's potentially been brought through specifically to play this game against these guys, because he is, as much of a South African mould of a forward that we can produce.
I mean, this is the whole thing about it. I can't contemplate a draw, but it's one or t'other, isn't it? The pendulum's going to swing.
I know.
The
biggest thing about the All Blacks right now is that we're sitting here in almost September. We don't know who the wings for the All Blacks should be.
DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Just over a week away, ladies and gentlemen, and the Boks, who have arrived in Auckland, play the first of 2 tests here in New Zealand. The big build-up begins now. Why the hell not? Normally it's about a week out, but I thought let's extend it a day. Our good mate Jamie Wall from RNZ has joined us again, and we got lots to talk about. The temptation, Jamie, is to look backwards again, but we've been doing this for days. We've been doing this all week. I don't know how long a post-mortem goes for. We can touch briefly on a couple of things about the Argentinian loss. I want to look this direction now and go, okay, how do we regroup from that? What can we expect in terms of All Black selections next week? The mood of the nation, a couple of questions around that, and also a charm offensive from the Springboks, which, we saw the press release last night, and, a couple of quotes from Rassie in there. And they did this last time they were here, but they're here, and they're here really. Let's start, though, with just, and look, you can make whatever you want to of stats, ladies and gentlemen, and I've got them here. First 19 tests for Razor in charge, 5 losses. First 19 tests for Ian Foster in charge, almost the same, 4 losses, 1 draw. So marginally, he's got a slightly better record, obviously. And at that stage, then he started copying it like a chook. We lost to Ireland and France. We lost to Ireland twice. We lost to Africa twice. We'd won 1 game in 5 out of 6. Can I say that I think that you've been not a big defender of this group, but you've been in favour of this group, and you've cut them a lot of slack and you've given them a lot of time. When does that run out, or does it run out for you?
Next Saturday night.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. The questions need to start being asked about where this All Black team's going if they can't defend the one record that is probably the most unique right now in World Rugby, which is the Eden Park streak. It's one of those things that's kind of been more manufactured than organic, but it's still it's still a thing.
Yeah.
And it means something now that we have the world champions coming in and trying to break it. I don't know who's got more pressure on them, because it's something that it's a pressure that the All Blacks have been dealing with for probably like 15 years now, when people started to realise, like, hey, hang on,
we haven't lost since France, I think.
Yeah,
right.
And so it's something that's sort of always been talked about ever since. Now the Springboks, because they haven't played here for so long, are having all that pressure put on them. So debate about who's under more pressure in this game right now, especially considering the results that have happened over the last fortnight. But yes, to answer your question, I think that if things go south against South Africa and we see a couple of losses, and no matter what sort of fashion, we have to start asking some questions now, like we did of Ian Foster's group, because it was about this stage that we started saying, hang on, what's actually going on here? Just on your record that you mentioned before, I mean, I think it's interesting, like the results that they marry up as well as they do, but it is also worth looking at the strengths of schedule.
Sure, that's why I said you can manufacture whatever argument you want about stats.
I think that Scott Robertson been dealt like a pretty challenging start by playing England in his first Test match. I don't think too many All Black coaches have ever had to go straight in against a Tier 1 nation. And then this year, you end up with a French team that's ended up being a lot better than we all thought. I think time will tell who that says more about, France or the All Blacks. But yeah, like I said, we're at a point now. It's a year and a half in. You had to have got your stuff together to now be reassuring the New Zealand public that this team is heading in the right direction, and we're going to know over the next fortnight.
The muddling backline that we saw against Argentina, which isn't the first time this is seen, they haven't clicked how we'd expect them to in all 5 tests so far. And, straight away, the words Wayne Smith get bandied around okay, let's get him back in to fix this. Before we talk about that, I want to talk about Leroy McDonald and what went on last year. And no one really knows what happened there. I mean, we got a version of it, which is fine, and I'm happy to accept that. Obviously, there was disagreement. Obviously, they fell out. Obviously, whatever their philosophies were, they were clashing and so forth. How much now, when you look back at it and you think of a difference he might have made, or what he would have imprinted on this All Black backline?
Yeah, great question, because we're never going to know, because he wasn't there long enough to really kind of make like a massive incremental change to what they were doing. Because if you look at the start of last year, it ended up being very much sort of carry on what had happened in terms of selections, in terms of gameplay for that first half of that season, before we actually sort of started to seeing any sort of shift. And we're still seeing that shift now. I'm a little bit more charitable about the backline and the attack, because I think we saw enough in that French series and then again in the Cordoba test to see that when they get it right, like, it works really well. They've shown a couple of different looks on attack, things that have worked, which in the first French test we saw just quite a heavy dependence on like backdoor play and front forward block runners coming in, which is in modern test rugby probably pretty basic and pretty easy to figure out, but it still worked. I was really impressed with what they did in that test in Wellington, where it seemed like a much more fundamental change, where the ball was getting moved up the middle and you had these series of options around every ball carrier. And if you remember that try that Tavatavanawai got, it was off a series of really good offloads.
Yeah, right.
And
yep.
I think maybe that's...
And he's still untouched, yeah, you're right.
I think that's maybe something that works so well that they kind of want to keep it in their pocket for when they really need it. And it was this kind of like diamond formation. And Moni Narawa, ironically, who hasn't been seen since, was a real key part of that. And if you get those wingers in off the edges and get them involved in that, it gives you these great attacking options. And it's something that once you get on a roll, it's really, really hard to stop. So I think from a positive point of view, like the stuff that they're doing well is working quite well. From a negative point of view, it's when it goes wrong, they don't seem to be able to sort of get it going again. There's nothing, there's no sort of ignition happening in that back line, and there doesn't feel like there's anyone out there other than Will Jordan. And then the Pumas, all they had to do was take him out of the game by simply kicking the ball to him, and he'd go up for a contest. He's out of the game. And if he's not firing, it didn't really feel like the All Blacks kind of had anything else.
Yeah. It was a bit individual, wasn't it? And it just felt like we're looking for somebody to spark something and do something brilliant, as opposed to getting back into that pattern. And, you talk about Bomb and him. TJ was on Monday, and we were going back to 2009, Jamie, and you'll remember this well as well. 3 tests against the Boks. We couldn't catch COVID at that stage, could we? And at that stage, he said, he'd interviewed for a program that he'd done, and he'd sat down with Steve Hansen and Ted, and they said that they had to actually reinvent with Wayne Smith the way that they were going to counter that. And that meant changing the wingers. Bringing Corey Jane in, who was a fullback, and putting him on the wing. But that was the original bomb squad, diffusing those bombs. And then it has not revisited, but we're kind of almost in that same situation again at the moment. I mean, the tactics from the Pumas was really simple, wasn't it? It was just basically go to the air, and our guys just didn't seem to have a plan to counter that, and then they started dropping them, and then things just started to go. So where do we go from now into the Bok game? Because everyone in the world's watching that, and everyone is thinking, okay, are the All Blacks vulnerable here? Okay,
here's the biggest issue right now. The biggest thing about the All Blacks right now is that we're sitting here in almost September, and we don't know who the wings for the All Blacks should be.
Well, we thought we did.
Well,
didn't we?
But we don't. And that to me is a travesty, because we're sitting here talking about the number one position that the All Blacks have ever been able to produce. We've produced the best wingers in the world for our entire history of playing this game, and all of a sudden we don't really feel like we have any. And that's not right. Now, I'm not sure whether that's a failure of the All Black system or whether it's a failure of Super Rugby, or whether it's a failure of just simple selections and then they're not giving guys a go. I would have picked Leroy Carter by now, because I think traditionally you pick a guy who's young and fast and is scoring a lot of tries. Like, that's simply what Super Rugby is.
Well, that's what the All Blacks have always done.
Exactly. So I don't know why they're not doing it anymore. Caleb Clarke's injury has proved to be a lot more impactful than we would have thought, because perhaps it has had an effect on the aforementioned attacking shape that they're playing, and that it was kind of reliant on him. And it's meant that Will Jordan has had to do a lot of that workload. And you have to remember that first test against the Pumas, Will Jordan was really instrumental in that, in kind of setting up a try that really took the game away from the Pumas before the first half had even ended.
Yep.
And to only have one guy on the field who can do that, that's how other test teams play, that they have their one attacking weapon out there. The All Blacks should have like 3 or 4. And the fact that, we're sitting here now going like, okay, well, who's going to play on the wing next weekend?
Yeah.
And we could both come up with about 6 combinations each. And that's not right.
So, again, just trying to get into their minds, the selectors' minds, and they can't be shown to be panicking at all here, right? Would it be a panic selection if you debut 2 guys? If you put Tavatavanawai on one wing and Leroy Carter on the other? What does that say? Does that say we've got this wrong and now we're going to get it right? Because it's a lot easier sitting on this side of the microphone or the couch just to claim and go, hey, that guy's really fast. That guy was brilliant in Super Rugby. Let's throw them in. Do you throw them into this test at Eden Park against the Springboks? Because we've done it before with the All Blacks. Look, I go back to the Lions series in 1977, and that third test, we were moosed in the second test, and the third test we just made wholesale changes. Bevan Wilson came in at fullback. We did, and man, the All Blacks played well. We've done this in the past, right? It's almost rolling the dice, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that it's something that we don't see a lot in Test rugby anymore, because you have these pathway systems whereby you have guys coming in, like I'll use Fabian Holland as an example, who was always going to be an All Black, and because they'd brought him into the squad last year on the last year's end of year tour to essentially give him an apprenticeship to get him up to speed on the way things are going. And it's like, unless you've followed that pathway and you've had sort of a month or so in the environment to learn everything, not just on the field but off it as well, then they're not going to give you a test.
But these guys have had that, haven't they now?
Yeah, they have. And I think that, therefore there's no excuse not to pick them. Like, why would you have brought Leroy Carter into the team if you weren't going to play him? Yes, he's an injury replacement, but now you're at a point now where something has to change out there. So why not do it? Tavatavanawai is an interesting one for me, because there has been a bit of discussion about like, well, where does his career actually go from now? Because if they see him as a midfielder, I mean, he's not getting past Geordie Barrett. So, what does he do? And they, you have Quinn Tupaia as a sort of a more viable bench option, at least to cover midfield anyway. And it just basically is going to come down to, what do they want? Do they want a Quinn Tupaia or do they want a Tavatavanawai? Because they're very different players. Mm-hmm. So, does he end up, not picked next year and in a predecessor situation?
Yeah, God, that's unfortunate, isn't it?
Yeah,
God, I feel so sorry for that guy. I felt like he just didn't get us enough of a chance.
Yeah, and I just hope we're not sitting here next year having this guy, oh man, what happened to that guy?
Can you see wholesale changes, Jamie? When I say wholesale changes, I'm even talking 2 or 3 different players, right? Or do you think that they go, listen, you guys, you deserve a chance to rewrite what happened in Buenos Aires?
Well, I think that the forward pack essentially stays the same. The type 5, as always, kind of picks itself. They had an off game in Buenos Aires, but I would put that down to the 2 cards and the amount of extra work that they were doing across the field, and the toll that eventually took on them at the back end of the game meant that the set piece didn't work so as well. But I still have faith in that area of the game. Loose forwards will be interesting whether they persist with Simon Parker, because I feel like he is a guy who has potentially been brought through specifically to play this game against these guys, because he is, as much of a South African mould of a forward that we can produce. Yep. The big area is halfback, because now we're down to Finlay Christie and potentially Kyle Preston, who hasn't been capped yet.
Yep.
So fingers crossed Kyle Preston doesn't get injured against when he plays for Wellington this weekend against Auckland.
Good point. Yeah,
because now, I mean, who's after him? I mean, I'm thinking like...
It's unusual, isn't it, to think that in one position we've lost so many players.
Yeah, we're almost in a kind of a Stephen Donald kind of situation.
Yeah, the World
here.
Cup, you're right. Yeah,
and Finlay Christie, all due respect, kind of similar public perception
now.
So, I mean, hey, it's all on for him to be a hero and have a movie made about him. And then the rest of the backline, I think that obviously, I think they stick with Bowden. I think they stick with the same midfield. I think Proctor stays there. Geordie stays, obviously. Jordan, obviously, at fullback.
You wouldn't change him to a wing position?
No, I don't think they will. Would I do it? Yeah, I mean, I'd think about it, but I don't think they will. Because who do you put there? I think Ruben Love was...
Well, again, another guy who, what happens to this guy, Jamie? He's been around, he's been in that environment for a long time.
I feel
do you unleash him?
I feel, though, that at least Ruben Love has a couple more strings to his bow in terms of being able to play 10 as well, and that he will basically stay part of the All Black setup because of his versatility value, and therefore get semi-regular test appearances. Is this one of them? I don't think so, though.
Do we care enough as a country still about the All Blacks losing? And, we've discussed this on the show as well over the last couple of days, and I'll repeat myself ad nauseum that when we started Radio Sport, and you know this, that it kicked off on the back of the All Blacks. That was the biggest noise there was. The All Blacks lost 5 in a row in 98. Unheard of, because we'd had an unbeaten year in 97. Then we go and get upset by France after putting 50 points on them here, I think it was in Wellington. And then they burgle us. Well, they beat us fair and square. They beat us up in that semi-final. The country went apoplectic. And it went for years almost, didn't it? But
it's still going. So I mean, you're still talking about it.
But do we care as much, or has a generation softened us? Have our attitudes changed? Have your attitudes changed since that time? Do you get angry when we lose? How do you react to a loss?
Yeah, of course my attitudes have changed. I mean, I've grown up for a start.
You're a family man now. You're a father, and
yeah, and I think that if you're the same person you were and you feel the same way you did about things 25 years ago,
27
years ago, you probably need to have a good hard look at yourself in the mirror, to be honest. I think as a country, and I can't speak for everyone, and I know that you and I exist in this bubble where it's the biggest thing that we talk about, because these are our jobs.
Yes.
What we do all week relies on is shaped by the results that this team plays. Mm-hmm. Our jobs are shaped by this. Our livelihoods are. Yeah. So I acknowledge that we live in this bubble. You step outside the bubble, you go talk to other people, and I try and do this as often as I possibly can, because it really helps shape my perception of the way things are going, is that I don't think we've softened as a country. I think it means a lot to us. I just think we're better at dealing with it, because we're emotionally, as a country, we've kind of...
Have we matured?
We've evolved.
Have we? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think the country's changed a lot since the time that you talked about in terms of demographics, and that we have different voices in our society now, and that's a good thing. It's a fundamentally good thing. What I think we are good at, and it's something we're a lot better at, and something I'm really proud of, is that we're better at acknowledging the opposition and how good they are, and how much it means to them, and how much it takes to beat the All Blacks. Because we can sit here and talk about how bad the All Blacks were in that game all day. Right now in Argentina, there's a couple of guys like you and me, speaking in Spanish, talking about how good the Pumas were.
Yeah, exactly right.
And you have to remember that. Really important, you have to remember that nobody who beats the All Blacks, not one team, will ever look back at that game and go, actually, we weren't that good. We're not that happy with our performance. It means
nice perspective on it.
It means everything to them to win. All you got to do is look at what happened after that game. And this is a second round rugby championship game. And they cut the lights, the confetti went out, their fireworks went off. That's how much it means to these guys.
If you look back at the Frankie Dagus interview, people, keep clicking the subscribe button. It means a hell of a lot to us. If you look back at that, he pulled out the major dailies. It was front page news. Yeah. It wasn't back page news. No. This was front page news. That's normally reserved for Messi and the Argentinian football team, right? So that's how much it meant to that country. You're exactly right.
Yeah, and it's no different. It'll be no different in South Africa if they pull off a result next week. It'll be no different. Imagine if the Wallabies won the Bledisloe Cup. Imagine what it'd be like over there.
God, imagine what it'd be like here.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's what Australia, all my Australian friends and correspondents all say, that this is what is needed to absolutely galvanise the sport in Australia, to them to get that trophy.
So think about how much that says about the All Blacks, and about how beating the All Blacks, how it can fundamentally change the perception of a game in a country like Australia, Like, that's how much it would mean. So if you look at it that way, and I think that we as a country are really good at looking at it that way, I think that result against Ireland in 2016 was a real watershed moment where it was one of those ones where had it happened in the late 90s or early 2000s, there would have been
an overreaction to it.
Well, they probably wouldn't have been let back into the country.
Yeah.
And that the first most obvious reaction was, damn, that was a really gutting loss. But hey, well done to those
Well done
guys.
to Ireland. And yeah, you're right. Yeah. Okay. All right, we got a week to go. It's going to be a terrific build-up, and we're both involved heavily in this, as you say. I mean, every day next week there's going to be something to add, another narrative, something else to talk about. What is your gut feeling here? I still believe in this team, and I believe in these players, and I don't think they are bad players. And so I think that, there's so much riding on this particular game. What a boost to New Zealand if we do win this game. What a setback to us. I mean, this is the whole thing about it. I can't contemplate a draw, but it's one or t'other, isn't it? The pendulum's going to swing.
I know.
And we'll be talking about it all the way through. So
it just goes to show again, and it sort of relates back to your question before about do we care enough? Like, of course we do, because it seems really irrational to be put in that perspective of like it's one test match. And everything's either going to be great or it's going to be terrible. Mm-hmm. And it, like I said, it's irrational. A lot of people out there probably, questioning like, why is it such a big deal? But it is, and that's just the way that it is. It's the way it has been, and it's the way it will be. Because this is the All Blacks and the Springboks. It's the biggest game. It's the Eden Park streak for what that's worth, and it's the greatest rivalry in the history of the game, and the greatest rivalry, I think, in sports.
DSPN.